And today we have these two types of people in our country. And that's why I believe, you look at our elections, now it's always half and half. And it's such a volatile, to me, I can picture it, it's like Esau and Jacob in the womb fighting in America. And what did God say they were? Two nations. We hear that phrase often today in America when we're watching, any news network. They say there's two Americas. There's like two nations in America. People with two totally different mindsets. It's not like it used to be where you might, even Christians, among Christians, we have difference of opinions and so forth, but we still generally have the same mindset. Today, we have two nations, two peoples in one country with two totally different mindsets. One that hates our heritage, one that hates everything about America, and one that loves everything about America and wants to preserve it. It's fighting for America's birthright, Genesis chapter 25. And the theme of the lesson, I guess, that we could take from this study is that we must be like Jacob, as we're going to find out, and fight to preserve the birthright and heritage of our forefathers so that we can pass them down to our children and our children's children if time allowed, okay? So, it's interesting. I had a question by one of our listeners. I think they've been listening to us for a while. They said, their question was, is America a part of the 10 tribes of Israel? And if so, how does it help me as a Christian? And I think this study will actually answer that question pretty well, because it all has to do with a birthright. A birthright and a promise that was given to Abraham that was going to pass down from generation to generation to generation. It would always follow a people dedicated to God who wanted to live a life for God and cared deeply for their heritage and the blessings that were given to them. And at the end, I'll answer her question a little. I'm going to in the questions and comments section. It'll be in a separate video for our online listeners, but I will take a couple of questions from our online audience, and then we'll get into our questions and comments here with our local congregation. But anyways, this study, in this chapter, we're going to see Abraham's birthright blessings get passed down to his son Isaac and then sold away to Jacob from Esau. And the thing that we need to understand as we read through these verses is, as Americans, we too, like Isaac, have inherited a tremendous birthright from our forefathers. Nothing that we even did yet ourselves. We were just born into it. In fact, up here, birthright means a particular right of possession or privilege one has from birth, i.e. an inheritance. Now the liberals will cry out, white privilege, white privilege. Hey, I'm not ashamed, number one, that my ancestors, I'm not ashamed of their skin color, and I'm also not ashamed of the inheritance that they passed down to me. It is a privilege, it is a right, and I am so thankful for that God-given privilege. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not going to sell it away. I'm not going to go on the street corners like some of our family members and crazy leftists and want to just throw away God's birthright that He's given us because we feel guilty for having it. I have no guilt for it. I love it. I cherish it, and I want to keep it. And that is the mentality that Jacob had. As we're going to see here in this chapter. Esau, he was like the modern day liberal, could care less about his birthright. In fact, he was ready to sell it away for just, as we're going to find out, he sold it away for just a one small meal. Okay? One small meal. He cared less about it. This birthright that was passed on to Isaac, that we have today, I believe, this was passed down to Isaac thousands of years ago, and yet it still lives today. In the earlier chapters in Genesis, we found out that this birthright consisted of Abraham's chosen seed becoming a great nation. Now check this out, a great nation, a rich nation, a nation with a powerful military that would control the gates of its enemies. We did a study detailing all these things several chapters ago. And a nation, now check this out, and a nation that would be a blessing unto the world. Why would we want to throw those things away? Why would we think those things are bad? Our pilgrim forefathers passed this birthright onto us that came all the way from Abraham 400 years ago, actually in 1620, the Pilgrims landed on, the Mayflower landed, and then there was the Plymouth Rock and all that. That's coming up really soon, so it's a great time to be talking about this. They came here 400 years ago to lay the foundation stone for a nation that was to be built upon Christianity and enjoy the liberties that the gospel offers. And though we have such a great inheritance, we also have people in our own nation, from our own families, who care nothing about this birthright, our heritage, our forefathers, and they're willing to sell it away, just like the profane and godless brother of Jacob did, Esau. Okay? And here's a quote that I came up with here, but I'll sum it up like this. The left, as we're going to see throughout this study, the left despises our glorious American birthright of Christianity and freedom. They, like Esau, are willing to sell it for pennies on the dollar to gratify their own sinful lusts. Okay? Their own sinful lusts. Let's get into the word. Genesis chapter 25, verse 1. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. Now, there's a debate on whether or not this wife was taken after the death of Sarah. I believe she had already been taken. She just wasn't mentioned because there wasn't any significant drama with her story and Abraham's up until this time, because as we're going to see here, his grandchildren are actually mentioned in this genealogy of children from Keturah. This was just another concubine, and he had, as far as we know, he had at least 2 concubines and his one lawful wife, Sarah. So anyways, we're going to talk about these other children that were not the children of the chosen line. These were, verse 2, it says, and she bare him, Keturah, bare him, Zimram and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua. And Jokshan begat Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Asherim and Letisham and Leamim. I'm trying my best to say these. I didn't really felt it was worth my time and effort to go through the concordance and spend 3 hours trying to figure out how to pronounce these names exactly. So please forgive me for my usage of time. And the sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher and Hanok and Abida and Elildah, all these were the children of Keturah. Now, why are these names mentioned? Is this boring, mention all these names? Well, number one, it's important that we have these genealogies so that we can establish the history of nations, okay, for various purposes, for prophetic purposes, for purposes of proving the Bible, and so forth. I'm not going to get into those purposes today because that isn't the theme of our discussion here. But it is thought that these children of Keturah became the Arab nations of the world. And later on, we see the sons of Midian actually come in contact with the Israelites, and they actually became enemies to the Israelites. But they weren't always enemies, because Moses actually married a daughter of the priest of Midian. So for the most part, there was bad contact with these people, but they still were, nevertheless, family. Verse 5, and Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. Now check that out. Isaac was the lawful heir to all of the blessings and promises that were given to Abraham and his seed. This inheritance that Abraham is leaving to Isaac could not have been any greater. No one could possess a greater inheritance. Again, I'll repeat it. The inheritance of birthright inheritance of becoming a great nation, a nation numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sands of the sea, a nation that would control the gates of its enemies, a nation that would be a blessing unto the world, and the most important blessing is that through this line would come the Messiah, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So imagine this. All of this transferred, all of the blessings of Abraham now are being transferred to Isaac. Not to Keturah's sons, and not to Ishmael and his sons, as we're going to find out, but through Isaac's sons. God had a chosen people set aside for a specific purpose. Kind of like America. One nation under God. In God we trust. This nation is not here by accident. You know, I was listening to a pastor the other day. He got the question, is America written about in the book of Revelation? And he went on for a long time mocking and ridiculing that idea. And I thought, how shallow and how this man lacks both spiritual and prophetic insight to be able to say something. Yes, it doesn't say it plain as day. It doesn't say America by the words, but what prophecies do say things word by word in the Bible? If you're a student of prophecy, you know that they're not always very clear because they're given to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Now, if you were to look at America and say it's not written in the Bible, that could cause unbelievers. You look at, how could a nation such as ours, founded by such godly men that grew so fast, became so powerful, became so wealthy, not be written in the Bible? In my opinion, it would be foolish to think that it wouldn't be written in the Bible. All right? And I believe it is. It's simply that these blessings of Abraham passed on from generation to generation, and we are the actual Israelites of the Bible. Even if there's a debate whether we are biologically or not, I believe we are. But nevertheless, we do. You could say we are the new Israel. I mean, America is like a prototype of what Israel was in the Old Testament. God's dealing with that nation, using that nation to benefit the other nations of the world, trying to have that nation be a light and an example. Well, America's been that New Testament Israel. We've been spreading the gospel of the kingdom, and we've been, we're not perfect, obviously. And we're going to find out why. It's because we have Esau, a bunch of Esau's with us as well. Anyways, but unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. Now he sent these other children away, separate. There's many different lessons we can learn from. Well, for one, I'm just going to go to the basics here. I always like to build from the basics and then apply the spiritual lessons afterwards. I mean, it made sense because Isaac had a great inheritance. Now, these other children obviously would be a little jealous. They'd probably say that's white privilege. You're very Isaac. Damn you. That's white privilege. How dare you have this inheritance, right? And then they could have ganged up on him and tried to steal that inheritance from him. So Abraham was wise. He loved all of his children. It's not that he didn't love these other people that became the Arab nations. He did love them, and he gave them gifts. But the promise was, God told him that the seed would come through Isaac. So he knew that. He protected that. God has his reasons and his purposes, and we are not to question that because God is sovereign over all those affairs. It's maybe not something that we can completely understand, okay? But nevertheless, he sent them into the east country, no doubt into Arabia, and he sent them with gifts to keep them away from Isaac and so forth, okay? So what is the lesson for us? Well, we should be wise like Abraham. Abraham was very smart. He planned ahead. He looked ahead. He tried to make sure that his family would be left in a peaceful condition, that the inheritance would be passed on lawfully, and that there would be a smooth transition after his death. Another lesson could be multiculturalism doesn't work. And Abraham knew that. They couldn't all share in this inheritance. Abraham didn't say, like a lot of people would say, well, why don't you just let them all mingle together and share the inheritance? Because that wasn't part of God's plan. God wanted one people, one culture, for one purpose, to ultimately become a great nation, to be a blessing unto the world. And God knew the people. As we're going to find out when they were in the womb, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, God says, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated. God knew beforehand the potential that each person had in performing his work and advancing his kingdom. And evidently he didn't see that potential in the Midianites, the sons of Keturah, or the sons of Ishmael. Okay? It just wasn't there. And who are we to question God? Certainly I'm not going to. All right? All right. So you could say, another lesson we could apply to this, those that hate America, that, let's say they're like Isaac, they thought they were jealous, and they say, well, we want that for ourselves. Hey, Abraham sent them away. Well, those that don't like our country, don't want to assimilate into our culture, and they come here from other countries, we shouldn't allow them to become citizens. We should say, like Trump said, go back home where you came from. Go fix your own country if you hate this country so much. All right? That would alleviate. Why would we want people in our country that hate us and would make war with us? That doesn't make any sense. It's not popular to say, but God's word's never been popular. Verse 7. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived 115 years, 175 years old, long life. And Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. All right? Gathered to his people. And I'm not going to go into this a lot. Abraham had an idolatrous family. So I thought, why would he be gathered to his people? You'd think it would say he was gathered to heaven. Well, I'm not going to get into this topic in depth because, quite honestly, I haven't studied it enough to be confident in what I'm going to say. But it is thought, I'll say it that way, the easy way out. It is thought by others that when people died back before Jesus paid the price on the cross, that they went to a place called Sheol. We call it the grave. In the Hebrew, it's Sheol. It's the place of the departed spirits. And I'm not talking about purgatory or anything like that. I'm talking about Sheol. Okay. So this would be so everybody would go there, even his pagan, idolatrous brothers and sisters and father and all that he came from. And then they waited there in that place until Jesus paid the price on the cross, and Jesus freed them from that, and now enabled them to be with him in heaven with himself. The blood had to be spilled first. I'm not going to get into that. It's just a thought in passing. But one thing that's interesting about this is that most life after death experiences, or when somebody's in the process of dying, they say that they see their loved ones coming to gather them. And some of these loved ones might have been people that were never even Christians. So how could they be there to gather them there? It's interesting. But it does seem to suggest that people or loved ones come to greet you at the time of death. Verse 9. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in a cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zoar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. Now this is interesting because the last time Ishmael was mentioned, he was mocking Isaac and was banished from the family along with his mother Hagar. But here, both of these boys appear to have loved their father enough to set aside their animosities toward each other and at least unite in making sure their father had an honorable burial. And today, you even see this happen in families. I've heard of many cases where there's been rifts in the family, but then the death of a loved one sometimes can bring these warring factions back together. Maybe because they start thinking of how temporal this life is, how fragile it is, and how, and they start thinking about the more important things. Verse 10, the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth, there was Abraham buried and Sarah his wife. Okay, this was the same tomb that Abraham purchased for his wife, that Abraham would be buried in. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. Verse 11, and it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahari. Okay? So it's important to notice that God blessed his son Isaac. Okay? All the blessings are going on to him. It's evident here that the promises that were given to Abraham and his seed are now officially being transferred onto Isaac. Okay? Verse 12. Now we're going to be talking about Abraham's children through Hagar, the Ishmaelites. These are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, and Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, that she bare unto Abraham. Verse 13, and these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names, according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth, and Kedar, and Abdiel, and they kind of sound like Arab names almost, and Mibsam, and Mishra, and Duma, and Masa. Verse 15, Hadar, and Tema, and Jetur, and Naphesh, and Kedemah. Here we go, verse 16. These are the sons of Ishmael. They were Abraham's children, and these are their names by their towns, by their castles, 12 princes according to their nations. So, though Ishmael was not the chosen heir, he was still blessed by God to a certain extent. His descendants grew into 12 separate nations. You know, America isn't the only blessed nation in the world. I'm not saying that. But as Ishmael was blessed, he was not blessed nearly in comparison as Isaac would be blessed. Okay? Because of God's overall purposes in bringing in his kingdom. Verse 17, and these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he gave up the ghost and died and was gathered unto his people. And they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest toward Assyria, and he died in the presence of all his brethren. So this was in the Middle East, okay? Okay, I'm going to repeat this again. Though there were many sons of Abraham, there was only one heir to the promises of God, and to become a great nation, to control the gates of their enemies, and to be a blessing unto all nations, and that was through Isaac. I'm going to quickly go over to Romans chapter 9. You can turn if you want. I'm going to read about 4 verses from there. Romans chapter 9 verse 7, to prove this point, that there were many children of Abraham, but only one chosen heir to receive the birthright. It reads, Paul says in Romans 9 verse 7, neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Okay, they were all children of Abraham. What Paul is saying is they are not children of the promise. Okay, they're not children of the promise. Verse 8, that is, could you imagine the liberals back here at this time? How dare, that's racist, man, to say that. You're evil, We're all the same. All equality and multiculturalism. And this, man. Now you know why they hate the Bible so much, all right? Verse 8. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. So all these other children that Abraham had, they were not spiritually minded children, except for Isaac. They thought of things of the flesh. Okay, they didn't think deeper into the things of God. And that's important because we have two kinds of people in America today. We have spiritually minded people and we have carnal minded people. The liberals definitely are carnal minded, okay? And most of the conservatives generally are spiritually minded. I'm not saying they're all perfect because they say they're Christian, because there's even a smaller remnant than that within. But nevertheless, I'm going to generalize it as two kinds of people in our country. Spiritually minded and carnal minded. Left and right. I should say right and left. Let's put that in order. The left are carnal and the right are more spiritually minded. And I'm going to talk about that in a second and kind of shore up that point a little bit. For this is the word of promise. At Romans 9:9, at this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only this, but when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even by our father Isaac. And then I think I cut off the rest of the verses. Can't remember if I was going to go into that even more. But anyways, nevertheless, actually we are going to finish reading a few more of those verses from Romans 9 in a little bit. But the point is that not all the children of Abraham, such as the children of Hagar and the children of Keturah, they were not the children of God. It was Isaac, okay? Isaac and his seed. All right, verse 19, we're moving on to if you wanted to give this a subtitle, you call it the Birthright Jacob versus Esau. And these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac. Remember, Isaac was the chosen line. So at first instance, you'd think, well, any children Isaac has now are the chosen people. It's not true. Even within Isaac's seed, that line would only go through one of his sons. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And verse 21, and Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now check this out. What did Abraham, it's obvious here that Isaac learned from the mistakes of his parents, Abraham and Sarah, because what did Abraham and Sarah do when they couldn't have children? Sarah came up with this idea, hey, you can still have children, but just you can have them through my handmaid, and they'll be legally mine, and that therefore you can fulfill the promises of God. So instead of going to prayer like Isaac and Rebekah did here, Abraham and Sarah tried to contrive their own ways to achieve great blessings and promises of God. So no doubt Isaac knew better. He knew that mistake actually caused the birth of his half brother, which was a brother that would mock him, and there would be strife and contention in the family because of that choice to try to do it their own way. And now he wants to do it God's way. His wife could not conceive, so the proper way was to go to the Lord in prayer. Okay? All right. You know, it's interesting. I'll say this. We want to apply this to our daily lives. I like to do this as well. Sometimes we learn what not to do by watching others. Sometimes, my kids will do the same to me, I'm sure. But sometimes we look at things that our parents have done, like Isaac and Rebekah did, and they said, well, we don't want to do that because we saw what happened because of that. And it's a good thing to do, to learn from other people's mistakes. Don't repeat the same things that cause other people strife and turmoil. Now, it doesn't have to just be learning from family members. It even happens to younger kids will learn from their older siblings. When the older sibling does something, gets in big trouble, screws up their life or whatever, the younger sibling looks and says, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to repeat that. All right. Verse 22, and the children struggled together within her and said, now check, this is important. The children struggled together within her. Now, Rebekah, in the other chapter, we did a whole beautiful study about her being a symbol of the church of God, the elect of God. And now in her womb, if you would, you could even, if you wanted to spiritualize this, the church, inside the church's womb would be two factions that struggle against each other. You have the Esau and you have the Jacob. The spiritually minded man versus the carnal man. And today I'm going to apply this to America, since America was founded by the church. It was a political agreement between the churches in America. So America was the church in the beginning. It's just that you look at it today and you say, well, how could America be the church? You got all these unbelievers. Well, how could Rebekah be the church if inside her womb she had a carnal man and a spiritual man? Okay, so I'm just generalizing this as a type. So since the birth of America, America was birthed by the Pilgrims on the Mayflower. It was. In fact, I think Donald Trump even mentioned it here later that the first political assemblies in America were born in a church. I think some of the first legislative meetings and stuff like that met in a church. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but what I am going to say is that, since the beginning of America's founding, there has been a struggle. There's not always been just good. Not all of our founding fathers were great. There were Esau's back then. There's been a struggle between the Esau's and the Jacobs since its inception. And now, check this out. Verse 23, and the Lord said unto her, I don't know if I finished reading. I'm going to read that again if I hadn't. And the children struggled together within her, and she said, if it be so, why am I thus? and she went to inquire of the Lord. Now Rebekah was obviously a good woman. We're going to find out she knew the will of God, as we're going to see here. Where Isaac actually, in this case, was not as spiritually minded, surprisingly, as Rebekah was. And sometimes that happens even to this day. Verse 23, and the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. The one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. Now the birthright generally, by law, was to go to the firstborn. Now here, God is giving kind of a mysterious parable to Rebekah about her children. She's wondering, why are these children fighting in my womb? This can't be a good sign. Her stomach's probably, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, probably causing her pain, So she was thinking, there's something about this. Am I being punished? Is this bad? So she's wondering. God's answer was that then he says there's two people in her womb. The elder shall serve the younger. So he reversed the roles. It's interesting, God does that sometimes. So the birthright, in a sense, actually, what we would say would belong to the younger son and not the older one in this case. All right. Verse 10. Now I want you guys to think about this. Jesus said that he didn't come to bring peace, but he came to bring division. And he even said, even among your own family, there would be 2 against 3 and 3 against 2. Now, here in this case, you had 2 people born of the same womb that had a father that had the promises of the birthright and all these great blessings, but they were 2 totally different sons. One was spiritually minded and one was carnal minded. Okay, and we see that even we wonder, why do we have liberal family members? Why are some of them so whacked out? Well, it was like that since the beginning of time. There was the Esau and there was the Jacob. And there was one other thing I was going to say about that, but I can't remember. But anyways, I'll probably think of it as we go. All right. So how can this be? Well, we're going to go back to Romans chapter 9, verse 10. Why would God... I'm just going to read 4 more verses back there. Why would God choose the younger instead of the older? We're going to find out the younger was Jacob and the older would be Esau, even though they were twins. Verse 10, Romans 9, verse 10. And not only this, but when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even by our father Isaac, check this out, verse 11. For the children being not yet born, neither having done good or evil, that the purpose of God according to what? Election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. Okay? Now think about that. Why were you born in America? Why is it fair that you were born here with this birthright and other people are born in China, Africa, you name it, somewhere else? It's because... Sweden. Okay, or Sweden. It's because God has a purpose, and he has an election. He chooses people to be born in certain places for his purposes. We don't always know what that is. But what we do know is we live in a nation that has a birthright. And we are to cherish that birthright and love our heritage, not trash our heritage, not go and trash our forefathers like the liberals are always trying to do. Any of our history of George Washington, any of our other godly forefathers, they want to remove their monuments. They want to strike their name from all tablets and written records everywhere. Get rid of our inheritance. Those evil, evil white men, they would say, that did all these terrible things. Okay? That's what they say. Verse 12, it was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. It's pretty strong language. And they didn't even do anything yet. They hadn't even entered into the world yet, and God already knew what these 2 children would do. Can I explain that? No, I really can't. I can't explain how that works, but he does know that. And the reason why he hated Esau, because he knew Esau would be a waster. He would care less about God. He would not teach his children about God. He would only think about the things of the flesh. In fact, we're going to find out later that Esau was he spent all of his time sporting. He was a sportsman who always was too busy to spend time with God. Now, I love to hunt, and we're going to talk about Esau in a second, but since I'm there, I love to hunt. I think it's fun and everything. But there are a lot of people in America, a lot of men in America that are like Esau today. They watch football on Sunday, and they hunt all week, and they have no time for God. That was what Esau was like. It wasn't like Esau was not a manly man. Esau was a manly man, but all he relied upon was his flesh and the desires of his flesh. That's why God did not choose him. Anyways, verse 24, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red all over, like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. So no doubt, Esau was, when he came out, he was covered all over with red hair. And I think this is important because it actually gives you a marker characteristic of the family of Jacob, the children of Abraham. A lot of people look at the modern day, they think of Judah today, or the Jews today. They think the true Jews or true Judah, that they look like Hagar's children, the Arabs, the Middle Eastern type people, and so forth. But here we actually have an instance of a physical description of what Jacob's brother looked like. Now, if Esau had these genes, Jacob would have them as well. Jacob would no doubt have red-haired children, and so forth. So it is a little clue as to what the biological descendants of Israel look like. They will have people that will give birth to red-haired people. Now, that doesn't mean that all Israelites, that all red-haired people are Israelites, because Esau was not an Israelite. There are children of Esau today that have red hair, obviously. But on the flip side of that doesn't mean that people with red hair are Esau. My wife has red hair, so she's definitely a spiritually minded woman. She's not an Esauite. All right? So, anyways, that's an important little clue as to who the Israelites are. It is the people of Caucasian origin that give birth to children with red hair. It is not the people of the Middle Eastern origin. Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 talks about those who claim to be Jews and are not and do lie, but are of the synagogue of Satan. All right? Anyways, verse 26. After that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. Now, Jacob actually means the heel grabber or the contender. Now, our topic today is fighting for America's birthright. In fact, Jacob was your first prototype of what an overcomer is. We talked about that a lot the last two studies. We must be overcomers, not just saved. You must be someone who will contend for the faith, contend for the birthright, fight for America's Christian heritage and values. That's why Jacob was named that way. He was a very spiritually minded person. He knew what this birthright meant, and he wanted to protect it. He knew, no doubt, I believe he knew that he knew his brother's character. He knew he was a vile man, a man of the flesh. He knew that this brother would completely waste it. He would get the inheritance and trample on it and waste it away. It's kind of like the parable of maybe Esau would be like, maybe he'll come back someday and be like the prodigal son, okay? But I don't know. Maybe that doesn't fit because God didn't really have anything nice to say about Esau. All right? Although he did say later on in the scriptures that Esau was your brother and so forth. So, not going to get into that today. The boys grew, verse 27, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field. That's why I said he was a sportsman. He was a hunter, loved to hunt. And Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. Now again, I love hunting. I think just because Esau was a hunter doesn't mean hunting is bad or you're an Esau. It's whether your priorities are straight or not. If all you did was farm and build your business in your farm and had glorious fences and gates around your farm, but you never studied God's Word, then you'd be the same as an Esau, okay? But I think it is a good time to, talk about, you think about all the men that watch ESPN today 24 hours a day. because they want to be real manly men, like Esau, but they neglect the things of God. We don't want to be like that. I love our kids play sports. They play soccer, hockey, and things like that, and I think those things are good for them, but they should never come before the Word of God and His kingdom. In Esau's life, that's all that mattered. Okay? All that mattered was his own pleasures. Didn't care about his birthright. Didn't care about, I'll update this to today. The leftists, or not even all the leftists, there are that category of men in our country today that may not be leftists, they're still like an Esau if they neglect our birthright. If they're not teaching their children the Word of God, spreading that birthright, cherishing that birthright, and they're wasting it, then they are like an Esau. All right, verse 28. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now think about that. Isaac, man, what are you doing, buddy? Isaac's falling into the carnal nature here. He loved Esau more than Jacob because Esau was bringing him goodies all the time. Nice tasting meat. But Rebekah loved Jacob. Why did Rebekah love Jacob? Because she was spiritually minded and she saw something in Jacob. She knew that he was a godly man, that he was going to fight for the birthright and protect it and defend it. And she knew that it must go to Jacob. Nevertheless, God told her too, so she had foreknowledge of it. All right, so my point is here, in this case, Rebekah was more spiritually minded than Isaac. Isaac wasn't an Esau, but he still wasn't quite as spiritually in tune as Rebekah was here. Verse 29. And Jacob sawed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, Sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall... Now check this out, look at his attitude. What profit shall this birthright do to me? Now this shows the shallowness of Esau. This birthright really didn't have a lot to do with the holder at that time, though they benefited greatly from it. The birthright and promises that Esau was to inherit because he was the firstborn were given to Abraham were more to do with the descendants than themselves. In other words, Esau he only cared about himself. He was a selfish, carnal man who cared nothing about his children's inheritance and his children's children's inheritance, and that is to say an inheritance of a people that would be seeking God's kingdom. So he was a very selfish man, only cared about himself. What good's it going to do me if I die? I don't care about this birthright. I'll sell it to you as long as I get to live. Now, in America today, our founding fathers, now think about this. Our founding fathers fought for this birthright and were willing to die for it. Esau, willing to sell it rather than die. Now that is the mentality we ought to have in America today. Whatever the left says to us, whatever things they try to persecute us with, I would rather die than sell my birthright to these vile, carnal, heathen bastards. Okay? And maybe that's fair, because God loved Jacob and he hated Esau. Anyways, where was I?
32.
All right. So I'll sum it up this way. We can apply this to our own lives. Is godly men just don't think in the short term. They strive their entire life to leave their children a godly inheritance and birthright. Now that doesn't just mean, okay, man, I'm really ashamed of myself if I can't pass on $1 million to my kids. That would be great. Abraham was able to do that. But the most important inheritance and birthright is to leave them with the truth, to leave them with the promises of God, to leave them with those as an inheritance. Okay, let me see here. And when God chose Abraham, the reason He chose him in the first place and gave these blessings to him was because God said, "I know Abraham. I know that he will teach his children." and his children's children, and that would pass down the spiritual truth throughout generation to generation. All right, just a couple more minutes here. We're almost done. So I'll repeat this. Esau was equivalent to today's liberal Democrat, someone who despises our birthright and the founding and the blessings that our founding fathers has left us with. They lack moral values. We're going to find Esau actually married 2 Canaanite women, which was strictly forbidden to do. He didn't care. He didn't care about marrying a heathen woman. And then to fix that, because his mom was unhappy with it, he went and married a daughter of Ishmael. Whereas Isaac went and married the right and proper woman of the proper line. So there's another example of Esau. He cared less about the heritage. All right. Now, I will say one more thing, actually. I think of this in terms of the liberals. How, we talk about how we should pass on inheritance to our children. Conservatives, generally speaking, want to be responsible with our nation's finances. We want to produce, we want businesses to produce goods, and we want those to benefit families. We want families to be able to save and gather and pass on inheritances to their children. But liberals' idea, the leftists, the Esau's, it's tax and spend so I can have something right now. I can have a bowl of pottage in my tummy from the government. Just give me something right here and now. So they're willing to sell away our freedom, our birthrights for something here and now. Whereas Christian conservatives, generally speaking, our policies promote long-term growth and success that not only financially, but spiritually as well. And I'm going to add one more thing in here. You look at our president today, President Donald Trump. What is the movement that he's trying to lead? Make America great again. Okay? We have half of the people in our country that want to do that, right? And what does that statement really mean? Well, the promises that were given to Abraham included becoming a great nation, a powerful nation, a blessed nation. That's what we want. In other words, we could actually rephrase "Make America Great Again." We are fighting for America's birthright. That's what that statement says. We want to keep our heritage, keep our culture, and keep our religion. Okay? We don't want to give it away frivolously. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the Esau's, the leftists, who hate everything that America was built upon. They say that the evil, everywhere you go, it's if you're a white guy and you're a Christian, no matter what you say, if you say anything from the Bible, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a hater, da 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 da. I mean, they totally despise our heritage. All right. Here we go. Verse 33. And Jacob said, "Swear to me this day," and he sware unto him, and he sold him his birthright. Now, I got to back up and say one more thing. It is kind of interesting, Esau was a farmer. He lived, not a farmer, a hunter. That was his means of feeding himself and taking care of himself. It was a day-by-day existence. It wasn't thinking long-term. Wasn't planning and strategizing. It was, I'll go get something, kill it, and bring it back and eat and have a big party. Okay? Maybe celebrate with a couple kegs of beer while we're at it. Something. Maybe he was able to do that. I don't know. But Jacob, he was a farmer, so his natural tendency would be to always be looking ahead to the future. Producing, building, saving. Producing, building, and saving. And keep building up. And it would take strategy, it would take planning, it would take ingenuity. But, he had it caused him to be more thoughtful, I think. It caused him to be, taking care of the animals even that he would eat. All these cows and stuff that he was raising, and the animals he would eventually take care of them and then eat them. He really appreciated the things he had. Whereas Esau just went out, got some out of the field, took it back, ate it, and that was good. And here, we saw where that gets him. It got him to the point of poverty. Esau's lifestyle brought him to poverty. He didn't think long term, and he came to a point of poverty, and he was given a choice, and he sold out his birthright for one meal. Sad, very sad. All right. Verse 33, and Jacob said, swear to me this day. Okay, and he sold him his birthright. I read that. Now, I'm not going to, you guys don't have to turn there, but Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16 says concerning Esau, it was a warning to the church, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. So Esau was always an example, even of our founding fathers of Christianity, of a man that you don't want to be like. He was a man of the flesh. He was a fornicator. He was profane. He was vain and empty. And that's why God didn't choose him. All right. If you want to find out about his wives, we're going to talk about those in the upcoming chapters. I'm sure we'll have more to say about that. Genesis 26, 27, 28. We're going to be talking a lot about Esau and Jacob. But I'm going to go one more verse and then we'll conclude this. Verse 34, then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink and rose up and went his way. Now check this out. The last phrase of this chapter is this. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Okay? Esau was a secular man, driven by the lusts of the flesh, while Jacob was a spiritual man driven by the Spirit of God. That's the big difference. And today we have these two types of people in our country. And that's why I believe, you look at our elections, now it's always half and half. And it's such a volatile, to me, I can picture it, it's like Esau and Jacob in the womb fighting in America. And what did God say they were? Two nations. We hear that phrase often today in America when we're watching, any news network. They say there's two Americas. There's like two nations in America. People with two totally different mindsets. It's not like it used to be where you might, even Christians, among Christians, we have difference of opinions and so forth, but we still generally have the same mindset. Today, we have two nations, two peoples in one country with two totally different mindsets. One that hates our heritage, one that hates everything about America, and one that loves everything about America and wants to preserve it. And I think it is our duty as Christians to do everything in our power like Jacob, to be that heel grabber, to contend for these things that America stands for. Because if we, it was beautiful. I don't know the future of America, if Esau will win or Jacob will win, but biblically Jacob won out and Esau was eventually separated from the land. Wouldn't that be nice if we could just tell all the people, say, hey, are you a liberal Democrat? All right, get out of our country. Go make your own country somewhere else. And I'd give them half of the country. We could even give them the best half. Yeah, California. We could even give them California. We could even give them the best half, and we would eventually, if we stayed true to God, we'd make the other half become more blessed than their half anyways.
Christian Overcomers is brought to you by the tithes and offerings of our listeners. If you would like to support our ministry, please go to ChristianOvercomers.com. God bless you, and thank you for your support.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching on.